You've seen it happen. You served alongside someone, you both went through the same deployments, the same explosions, the same relentless grind. Now, years later, you both suffer from similar conditions, maybe chronic migraines, maybe severe knee pain, maybe crippling anxiety. But when the VA rating letters arrive, they tell two wildly different stories. Your friend gets 70% or 80%, maybe even 100%. You're stuck at 30% or 40%. It feels unfair. It feels fundamentally broken. You look at their symptoms, you look at yours, and you ask the question that keeps so many veterans up at night. If our conditions are similar, why are our payments so drastically different? This isn't an accident. It's not always bureaucratic malice, and it's certainly not random. It is almost exclusively a result of how the VA is legally mandated to rate disabilities. We need to stop focusing on the diagnosis and start focusing on the evidence of functional impairment. That is the single most critical piece of truth that separates a high rating from a low one. The VA doesn't pay for the name of the disease on the paper. They pay for the real-world daily limitations that disease imposes on your life. If you miss this distinction, you will always feel cheated. If you master this distinction, you can finally understand how to navigate the system effectively. We are going to break down the 8 core reasons why two veterans with seemingly identical conditions can receive vastly different compensation packages, and why understanding these nuances is the only way to secure the benefits you truly deserve. The first and most common reason for disparity is a fundamental misunderstanding of disparity. The functional test, rating the impairment, not the diagnosis. Think about two veterans, both diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. In a civilian medical office, that diagnosis is the end of the line. The treatment plan starts there. But for the VA, the diagnosis is just the starting gun. The VA needs to know, how much does this PTSD restrict your ability to work, socialize, and manage daily life? They use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, but they apply their own rating schedule, found in Title 38 of the Code of Federal Regulations, specifically Section 4.130. This section outlines ratings based on the severity of social and occupational impairment. Veteran A might have a diagnosis of PTSD, but can still hold down a steady job, maintain close relationships, and only occasionally experiences panic attacks that require medication adjustment. Their symptoms are manageable, though certainly present. They might receive a 30% rating. This rating acknowledges the condition exists and causes moderate impairment. Now consider Veteran B. They also have a PTSD diagnosis, but their symptoms manifest as chronic homelessness, inability to leave the house due to severe paranoia, frequent hospitalizations due to suicidal ideation, and total occupational impairment. They simply cannot hold a job. Even though both veterans have the same diagnosis, Veteran B's functional impairment is catastrophic. They will likely receive a 100% rating. The difference isn't the condition, it's the degree of functional loss. The VA rater isn't asking, do they have PTSD? They are asking, does the veteran meet the criteria for occupational and social impairment severe enough to warrant a 70% rating, which requires symptoms like near-continuous panic, or depression, impaired memory, or suicidal thoughts? This distinction applies across all conditions. Take degenerative joint disease in the knee. Veteran C might have X-rays showing severe arthritis, but they still have a decent range of motion and can walk 3 miles a day, experiencing only mild pain. They get 10%. Veteran D has the same diagnosis, but their range of motion is severely restricted. They need a cane, and they cannot stand for more than 5 minutes without excruciating pain. Their rating jumps to 40% or more, based purely on the measurable limitation of movement, not the name of the bone disease. This concept of functional impairment is often missed during the critical C&P examination, the Compensation and Pension Exam. Many veterans focus on telling the examiner about the pain or the diagnosis. But the examiner is trained to look for objective metrics, range of motion measurements, frequency and duration of hospital visits, and documented evidence of social isolation or job loss. If you tell the examiner you have chronic headaches, but fail to explain that these headaches occur 15 days a month and require you to miss work 4 times a month, the examiner will document the pain but miss the impairment. The resulting rating will reflect the lack of documented functional limitation, not the true severity of your suffering. This is why 2 identical diagnoses yield 2 different ratings. One veteran accurately documented their inability to function, the other did not. They failed the functional test. The second massive differentiator is the evidence gap. Why similar conditions have different medical proof. Even if 2 veterans have the same diagnosis and similar levels of functional impairment, the quality and quantity of the medical evidence supporting their claim can be the deciding factor between a 50% rating and a 90% rating. This is the C&P exam trap, and it catches thousands of veterans every year. Imagine 2 veterans claiming service connection for hearing loss and tinnitus. Both veterans were exposed to extreme noise in the engine room of a ship. Veteran E, when they filed their claim, provided only their discharge paperwork and a brief statement. When they went to the C&P exam, the audiologist conducted the standard tests. The results showed a measurable but moderate decline in hearing. The audiologist, lacking further evidence, rates the condition based purely on the test results and the brief history provided during the 15-minute exam. Veteran F, however, prepared meticulously. They provided their discharge paperwork, but they also included a detailed log of all hearing protection failures during their service, documented sick call visits from 20 years ago complaining of ringing ears, and, crucially, a private medical opinion, a nexus letter, from an independent audiologist who reviewed the service records and stated definitively that the current hearing loss was, at least as likely as not, caused by the documented shipboard noise exposure. Furthermore, Veteran F provided detailed lay statements from their spouse describing how the tinnitus severely disrupts their sleep every night, leading to chronic fatigue and irritability. The VA rater reviewing Veteran F's file has a mountain of evidence connecting the dots. They have objective test results and subjective, corroborating evidence showing the real-world impact. Veteran E, relying solely on the C&P exam, often finds their claim understated or even denied service connection entirely if the C&P examiner determines the hearing loss is merely age-related, lacking that crucial bridge of evidence. The difference in compensation here is not based on the medical condition itself, but on the strength of the argument presented to the VAE. The VA operates on evidence. If the evidence is thin, they must rule conservatively. If the evidence is overwhelming, they must rate aggressively. This is why veterans are often advised to never rely solely on the C&P exam. The C&P examiner is working for the VA to evaluate your claim, not necessarily to be your advocate. If your private medical records, your service treatment records, STRs, and your lay statements contradict or significantly supplement the findings of the C&P exam, the VA must consider the totality of the evidence. If one veteran's file is a thick, detailed binder of proof and the other's is a thin folder relying on a single examination, the outcome will inevitably be disparate, even for the same injury. The evidence gap is the silent killer of many deserving claims. This leads directly to the third point: the role of secondary conditions, the hidden multiplier, and the domino effect. Many veterans make the mistake of claiming only their primary service-connected condition. They get a rating for their knee pain and stop there. But the human body is a complex system, and often one service-connected injury leads to a cascade of other, non-obvious conditions. These secondary conditions are the hidden multipliers that can vault a veteran from a moderate rating, 30–40%, to a high rating, 70% or more. Consider Veteran G, who has a 40% rating for severe foot and ankle injuries sustained during a deployment. They are happy with the 40% and move on. Veteran H had the exact same foot and ankle injuries, also rated at 40%. However, Veteran H realized that because they walk abnormally due to the foot injury, they developed chronic, debilitating pain in their hips and lower back. Furthermore, the chronic, unrelenting pain led to severe depression and anxiety. Veteran H filed 3 additional claims, one for the hip pain secondary to the foot injury, one for the lower back pain secondary to the foot injury, and one for depression secondary to the chronic pain. If Veteran H successfully proves that the foot injury caused or aggravated the hip back pain and the mental health issues, those secondary conditions are now also service-connected. Let's assume the back pain is rated at 20%, the hip pain at 10%, and the depression at 50%. The VA uses a complex, nonlinear formula called the VA Math, the Combined Ratings Table, which means these ratings don't simply add up. But a 40%, 50%, 20%, and 10% rating combination will easily push Veteran H into the 80% or 90% bracket, possibly even 100% if the mental health component is severe enough to warrant total disability based on individual unemployability, TDIU, which we will discuss later. Veteran G, stuck at 40% for the primary injury, is receiving far less compensation despite the exact same initial injury simply because they failed to recognize and claim the domino effect of secondary conditions. The VA does not automatically look for these connections. The veteran must explicitly claim them and provide the medical nexus linking the primary condition to the secondary one. Common secondary conditions that dramatically increase ratings include sleep apnea caused or aggravated by PTSD or weight gain from service-connected mobility issues, peripheral neuropathy secondary to diabetes, often service-connected due to Agent Orange exposure, or hypertension secondary to kidney disease or PTSD. If one veteran is savvy enough to claim the entire constellation of their suffering and another only claims the initial injury, the compensation disparity is guaranteed to be vast. It's not about the severity of the primary condition, it's about the total burden of disability caused by service. The fourth critical element, often overlooked, is the effective date mystery. Why timing matters more than severity, the back pay factor. When veterans compare paychecks, they often focus solely on the monthly amount. But the biggest difference in total compensation can be the massive back pay awarded based on the effective date of the claim. 2 veterans with the same final rating can have hundreds of thousands of dollars difference in total payout based on when the VA decides their disability actually began. The effective date is generally the later of 2 dates, the date the VA received the claim or the date the disability arose. For veterans filing claims decades after separation, proving the date the disability arose is crucial. Consider Veteran Y and Veteran J. Both are granted a 70% rating for PTSD in 2024. Veteran I filed their initial claim in 2023. Their effective date is 2023. They receive back pay only for the year the claim was pending. Veteran J, however, filed their initial claim in 2024, but they had filed an intent to file back in 2020. Furthermore, Veteran J had been denied a similar claim for mental health issues back in 2005, but the VA failed to properly assist them or provide a necessary C&P exam at the time. Veteran J successfully reopened that 2005 claim, arguing that the VA made a clear and unmistakable error, CUE, in the initial denial, or that their current claim is simply a reopened claim for the same condition which has been continuously present since service. If Veteran J can successfully link their 2024 rating back to the 2005 denial date, or even back to their 2020 intent to file, their effective date shifts dramatically. A successful CUE claim or a successful appeal of a previously denied claim can move the effective date back decades. For a 70% rating, This difference in effective dates can translate to $200,000 or more in non-taxable back pay. The monthly benefit might be identical, but the total financial security provided by the VA is radically different. This is why continuous pursuit and maintaining an active intent to file status are vital. Many veterans give up after an initial denial, thinking the VA system is too complex. But a veteran who persistently appeals, reopens claims, and diligently works to establish the earliest possible effective date will receive a massive financial advantage over a veteran who simply accepts the first rating and moves on. The effective date is often the greatest variable in veteran compensation. Fifth, we must examine the specifics of the diagnostic codes. When two names mean different rules, the CFR 38 Deep Dive. Veterans often generalize their conditions, but the VA rating schedule is incredibly specific, and two seemingly similar diagnoses can fall under entirely different sections of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR 38, leading to vastly different potential maximum ratings. Take chronic pain. This is a common complaint. Veteran K claims chronic pain syndrome in their back. The VA looks for objective evidence of functional loss, range of motion, muscle weakness, nerve damage. If the rater finds no objective neurological deficit, the rating might be capped at 20% or 40% based purely on limited motion. Veteran L, however, has the same level of pain, but their claim is filed specifically as radiculopathy, nerve pain, stemming from a herniated disc. Radiculopathy is rated under the neurological system, not just the musculoskeletal system. The rating criteria for radiculopathy are based on severity of sensory loss, muscle atrophy, and interference with reflexes. A severe case of radiculopathy, even if the back pain itself is only moderately limiting, can lead to a 60% rating or higher, specifically because the VA is rating the nerve damage caused by the disc, not the disc itself. The same principle applies to mental health. Anxiety and depression, if diagnosed separately, are rated under the same general criteria, social and occupational impairment. But if a veteran has bipolar disorder, the rating schedule specifically looks for manic and depressive episodes. If they have an eating disorder, the rating schedule focuses on weight loss, hospitalization frequency, and nutritional status. The maximum rating for one diagnostic code might be easier to reach than for another, even if the subjective suffering is similar. Furthermore, the VA has specific rules about pyramiding, rating the same symptom multiple times. If two conditions share the exact same symptoms, for example, knee pain and hip pain causing the same limitation in standing, the VA will only rate the symptom once under the condition that provides the higher rating. A savvy veteran understands the specific diagnostic codes and frames their evidence to meet the highest possible criteria under the most advantageous code. A veteran who simply lists pain without linking it to the specific neurological or orthopedic limitation defined in CFR 38 will inevitably receive a lower rating than the veteran who understands the regulatory language. Sixth, the disparity often lies in the impact of lay evidence and nexus letters. Bridging the service connection. We touched on evidence earlier, but the distinction between lay evidence, the veteran's personal statement and statements from friends, family, and professional nexus letters, medical, opinions, is critical for achieving a high rating, especially for conditions that manifest years after service. Veteran M files a claim for migraines that started shortly after they left the service in 1995. They have medical records showing treatment for migraines starting in 2005. The VA denial letter states there is no evidence in the STRs, service treatment records, linking the migraines to service, and the 10-year gap between separation and first treatment is too long to establish a connection. Veteran M is denied service connection and receives 0%. Veteran N has the exact same medical history. But Veteran N includes two crucial pieces of evidence. First, a lay statement from their spouse describing how the migraines started immediately after the veteran returned home from the Gulf War, detailing the frequency and severity of the attacks. Before 2005, which is when the veteran finally sought formal treatment. This lay evidence fills the 10-year gap by providing credible, personal testimony that the condition was present and disabling during that period. Second, Veteran N obtains a nexus letter from a neurologist. This doctor reviews the veteran's service records, noting the veteran's exposure to burn pits and chronic dehydration during deployment, and provides a well-reasoned medical opinion stating that, based on the documented exposures and the veteran's credible lay testimony, the current chronic migraines are more likely than not related to their military service. The VA rater is now faced with a powerful combination: the veteran's credible testimony, filling the historical gap, and a medical professional bridging the scientific gap. Veteran N is granted service connection, perhaps at 50% or 70%, depending on the frequency and severity of prostrating attacks. Veteran M, who relied solely on their 2005 medical records, remains at 0% and denied service connection. The compensation disparity here is 100% determined by the veteran's ability to create a complete narrative using lay evidence and secure a strong medical opinion. The VA cannot deny a claim simply because it wasn't documented in the STRs if credible lay evidence and a supporting nexus letter establish the link. The veterans who get paid the most are the ones who understand that they are responsible for building the most comprehensive legal and medical case possible. Seventh, we must address DIU versus standard rating, the total disability loophole, the work barrier. This is often the biggest factor separating veterans with similar conditions but wildly different payouts, specifically those veterans stuck in the 70% to 90% range. TDIU, or total disability, based on individual unemployability, is a program designed for veterans whose service-connected disabilities prevent them from maintaining substantially gainful employment, even if their combined rating is less than 100%. To qualify, a veteran generally must have one service-connected disability rated at 60% or more, or two or more service-connected disabilities with a combined rating of 70% or more, where one of those conditions is rated at 40% or more. Veteran O and Veteran P both have a combined rating of 80% for orthopedic injuries and chronic pain. They have similar medical profiles. Veteran O is a retired police officer who now works part-time as a security consultant, earning $45,000 a year. Because Veteran O is engaged in substantially gainful employment, defined as exceeding the poverty line, they cannot qualify for TDIU. They receive their 80% compensation. Veteran P, however, tried to return to work as a truck driver but had to quit after 3 months because their chronic pain prevented them from sitting for long periods. They tried working as a cashier but had to quit due to severe anxiety and paranoia, secondary to their service-connected PTSD, which is rated at 50%. Veteran P's income for the last year was only $8,000. Veteran P files for TDIU, providing evidence of their failed attempts at employment and their inability to hold a job due to their service-connected conditions. Even though both veterans have an 80% rating, Veteran P is granted TDIU. This means that, for compensation purposes, Veteran P is paid at the 100% rate, tax-free. This difference is thousands of dollars per month. The key distinction is not the medical condition, it is the occupational barrier. Many veterans with high ratings, 70%, 80%, 90%, struggle significantly to work but never file for TDIU because they believe they must be 100% medically disabled. This is incorrect. TDIU is the VA's way of acknowledging that for some veterans, an 80% disability rating translates to 100% loss of earning capacity. The veteran who understands and utilizes the TDIU loophole effectively receives compensation equal to a 100% scheduler rating, while the veteran with similar health issues who is still gainfully employed or who simply failed to file the TDIU claim receives significantly less. This distinction is often the most financially impactful difference between two veterans with otherwise similar medical profiles. Finally, the eighth reason for compensation disparity is the PACT Act and presumptive conditions. When the rules change, the environmental factor. In recent years, the VA has shifted its policies regarding presumptive conditions, primarily through landmark legislation like the PACT Act, Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act. This has created a massive immediate disparity between veterans who understand the new rules and those who are still operating under the old system. A presumptive condition is one that the VA automatically assumes is service-connected if the veteran served in a specific location during a specific time period. The veteran does not need to provide a nexus letter or prove the link. The service itself is the proof. Consider Veteran Q and Veteran R. Both served in Iraq in 2005 and both developed chronic rhinitis, inflammation of the nasal passages, and asthma. Veteran Q filed their claim in 2018. Under the rules at the time, they had to prove that the dust and burn pit exposure caused their respiratory issues. The VA denied the claim, stating the evidence was inconclusive. Veteran Q gave up. Veteran R files their claim in 2023 after the PACT Act became law. The PACT Act added chronic rhinitis and asthma to the list of presumptive conditions for veterans who served in the Southwest Asia Theater of Operations after August 2, 1990. Veteran R's claim is approved almost immediately. The VA grants service connection and rates the rhinitis at 10% and the asthma at 30%. If requiring daily inhalers. Not only does Veteran R now receive compensation for these conditions, but the PACT Act also allows veterans like Veteran Q to refile their previously denied claims under the new presumptive rules. If Veteran Q refiles, their claim will likely be approved, and they may receive back pay dating back to their original 2018 filing date or potentially even earlier if they had an intent to file. The disparity here is not medical, it is purely regulatory. The veteran who keeps up with legislative changes and understands the power of presumptive conditions, whether it's Agent Orange exposure leading to type 2 diabetes or burn pit exposure leading to various cancers and respiratory conditions, has a massive advantage. They bypass the challenging requirement of proving a nexus and go straight to rating. A veteran who is unaware of these changes or fails to refile a previously denied claim is leaving significant compensation on the table, creating a massive pay gap between them and their equally deserving counterparts. The VA system is dynamic. Remaining static in your understanding of the rules guarantees you will be undercompensated. To summarize, the reason two veterans with similar conditions receive wildly different compensation is rarely about the severity of the diagnosis itself. It is a complex interplay of 8 crucial factors: the functional impairment documented, not just the diagnosis, the quality and quantity of supporting medical and lay evidence, the evidence gap, the successful identification and claiming of secondary conditions, the multiplier effect, the establishment of the earliest possible effective date, the back pay factor, the precise alignment of symptoms with the most advantageous diagnostic codes, the CFR 38 deep dive, the strategic use of lay statements and nexus letters, bridging the connection, the ability to prove unemployability, the TDIU loophole, and finally, the awareness and utilization of new presumptive conditions, the regulatory changes. If you are currently frustrated with your rating, stop comparing your diagnosis to your friends. Start comparing your US evidence file and your CAM, functional impairment documentation. Did you document every missed day of work? Did you claim the depression caused by the chronic pain? Did you get that nexus letter? Did you ensure your effective date was as early as possible? The VA system is designed to reward diligence and documentation. It is not designed to reward suffering alone. The veteran who masters the paperwork, who understands the regulations, and who fights for every single service-connected limitation will always receive the full compensation they deserve. Your mission now is to become the expert on your own claim, ensuring every piece of your suffering is accurately reflected in the language of functional impairment and the weight of irrefutable evidence.